Speaking of overcoming adversity, my next guest, he worked at the Pentagon. He left his office on that day to go to the bathroom just moments before the attack, and that saved his life. I want to welcome a friend to the show, Texas State Senator and retired Lieutenant Colonel Brian Birdwell, who joins me now. Senator, you know, you're one of my heroes. I met you in Florida, up in the Panhandle at an event about 5 years ago. I was scheduled to speak after you. It was a disaster because you told your 9/11 story, and I sat there, and as I always I say, Senator, it's not that a pin could have dropped in the room as you told your story. You could have heard a contact lens drop in the room. You're a real hero of mine. Tell us, please, what happened to you at the Pentagon on that dreadful day.
Well, it's a great story, the Lord's grace, Dan. I stepped out to go to the men's restroom, and for your viewers, the E-ring office that I had, the window just to the left on the second floor of where the building collapses is where my office was located. When I told Cheryl and Sandy I was going to step out and go to the men's restroom, I stepped out into the E-ring hallway, walked through what would be the crash site and what would collapse 27 minutes after impact to go up to the fourth quarter where the intersections with the E-ring to go to the men's restroom. Took care of business, came out 7 or 8 steps. I'm about to turn back into that hallway to walk back to the other side of the crash site where my desk was located, where my window is, when Flight 77s deliberately crashed into the building at 530 miles an hour with 3,000 gallons of jet fuel. And by the Lord's grace, I survived an 80-ton jet hitting me at 530 miles an hour. I shouldn't be here. I was set ablaze, tossed around like a rag doll. I was skinned alive, and I don't want to be gratuitously graphic to your audience, but the best way to describe it is I was terribly indisposed. The bulk of my uniform, I'm in Class B uniform, which is just button-up shirt, the pants, belt, shoes. Most of that is burned away. The belt is still intact. The shoes are still intact. And as I lay in the hallway waiting to die and surrendering to the fact that this was how I was going to join the Lord in eternity, most of my back is burning away. The back of my legs are burning away. So when I actually am able to get up using the wall that I've been blown up against and shuffle down the hallway, there are chunks of flesh hanging off the arms. My eyes are already beginning to swell shut. My access badge and name tag are still on the front of my shirt but melted. But the front of my shirt is here, but I've got a burn scar. The overwhelming bulk of the back is burned away. But the front of my shirt is still on me. It's basically burnt to me with my own charred blood on it. My pants are burned away. The socks above the shoe line are burned away. And as I stagger down the hallway, I'm shuffling. I cover about 25, 30 yards in this condition. The hallway is filling up with smoke. That corridor is filling up with smoke. And 4 men, Bill McKinnon, Roy Wallace, John Davies, and Chuck Knobloch, come out of the B-ring doors to come across me. And in my relief of knowing that I'm about to subordinate myself to whatever decisions my comrades in arms make on my behalf, and the exhaustion of covering 25, 30 yards in this condition, I collapse in front of Roy. In the haste to move me, and this is not a place to tarry and wait for medical care to get to me, we've got to move me, and because the fire's still raging and burning down the end of the hallway. They each grab a limb and give that first exertion to pick me up, but I don't come with them. They pull chunks off of me, and I begin yelling and screaming at them to leave me alone. And in my heart, I know I'm telling them, leave me there to die. They don't do that. Chuck rolls me over on the left-hand side. Touching me is agonizing, but on the left side of my torso is laying on the floor. Chuck puts his arms underneath it, and essentially Bill, Roy, Chuck, and John grasp each other's hands, functionally shaking hands with my body weight resting on their connected arms. They carry me into an A-ring hallway, and I'll receive my first medical care at what becomes a hasty triage site by a great Air Force doctor named John Baxter. Dr. Baxter will take my shoes off to be able to administer the morphine and the IV. The only place that has clean flesh is the top of my feet that was protected by the shoes. He puts the morphine in the right foot, IV in the left. A wonderful lady from the Navy, Natalie Ogletree, kneels down beside me. I have my mental faculties about me, but not my physical. I am trembling violently and cannot control it. We say the Lord's Prayer, the 23rd Psalm. She reads the 91st Psalm over me. Dr. Baxter is done with what he's doing to get the morphine and the IV in me, and then very shortly they'll put me on a bodyboard on the elongated ambulance, take me out to North Parking. Eventually I get to Georgetown, and so while the Georgetown University Hospital, and so while the Lord answered the question of life or death in the building, the question of life or death that day is yet to be answered. When I get inside Georgetown's emergency room, Dr. Williams comes to the left-hand side. He's the attending physician. He says, Colonel Birdwell, we're going to do the best that we possibly can for you. I asked to do two things. My breathing is already very difficult and labored because of the inhalation injury. I mean, I've got gunk coming out of me. The emergency room smells like a gas station because of the aerosolized jet fuel and the things that had burned away on me that had now saturated me. I asked to do two things. I asked for the wedding ring to be taken off my finger, and my hands look like 5 blackened hot dogs extending from a burnt steak called the hand. Judith Rogers, the nurse, just gives it a slight tug, degloves the finger, blood streaming out of the base of the hand, but I don't recall it hurting, Dan, and not because of the morphine that Dr. Baxter had given me, but because of the death I know I'm dying, and saying goodbye to Mel through the symbolism of that wedding ring. And then I asked for the hospital chaplain. She just led a simple prayer that, Lord, if you brought me here under the care as the great physician and Dr. Williams' team and I survive, we'll salute with that mission and move out. But if you've brought me here under the care and compassion of my fellow Americans and you call me into eternity, we'll salute that flag too. And that'd be the very beginning of a very difficult process that, you know, Mel and Matt and the emotional agony that they saw of watching me endure this, the physical agony that we endured, because being a burn survivor is bad enough, but what has to be done medically to you to survive it and recover from it is worse than the burn injury itself. And ultimately, 4 years later, I'd reached what's called maximum medical improvement. So I'm not the $6 million man, but the 2.4. And the Lord's been very gracious, and here we are 20 years later, and we've gotten to see things together with Mel and Matt that we thought that she would see as a widow, and the Lord's been gracious is the best way to say it, Dan.
Senator, I have nothing to add. I talk for a living, and I just want to say one last thing before we go here.
Yes,
one
sir.
last thing, sir.
Yes, sir.
You said to me on my radio show something when I asked you about the pain, the unimaginable pain you went through to recover. And you said to me, Dan, it's a measure of the price of freedom. And my whole audience heard that, and they just heard me say it again. So thank you, sir, for your sacrifice for this country. You're a good friend, and I got to say it's an honor to know you. Thank you, sir.
No, my treat to be with you, Dan. God bless you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. God bless. Wow. Take a deep breath, folks. America will never back down to anyone. Patriotic message sent by some of our nation's athletes. Pete Hegseth, coming up next.